News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Those U.S.-European trade talks in Scotland are almost underway. President Trump and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen prepping for a sit-down at President Trump's golf resort in Turnberry in western Scotland, where he was greeted by protesters yesterday. And the U.S. and EU working on that possible trade deal ahead of a U.S.-imposed deadline of August 1 to have a deal, or the U.S. will slap new tariffs on EU products. 30% tariffs on the bloc's exports to the U.S. are due to kick in. EU officials say an agreement ultimately rests with President Trump, and they say that makes the outcome hard to predict. It's back to school time for parents facing uncertainty about prices. Chief of Policy Programs at the Century Foundation, Angela Hanks.
Right now, there's a blanket 10% tariff on countries across the globe. There's a 30% tariff on China, which produces a number of the goods that people rely on for back-to-school shopping. And it's unclear what will happen with any of those tariffs come August 1st.
Hanks is Chief of Policy Programs at the Century Foundation. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent plans to meet his Chinese counterparts in Stockholm starting tomorrow for a third round of trade talks. There's supposed to be 2-day trade talks potentially. Meantime, we're also getting word Thailand and Cambodia are set to hold talks to discuss an end to their deadly border clashes. That's after President Trump warned Washington wouldn't make a trade deal with either country while that conflict continued. The clashes erupted July 24th. They've killed more than 30 people and displaced over 150,000 civilians on both sides. And those talks are set for tomorrow. In the Middle East, residents of Gaza City gathering at a charity kitchen, carrying their pots and hoping to get some food today. After reports of multiple starvation deaths inside war-torn Gaza, Israel is now allowing desperately needed aid airdrops and pausing military operations for 10 hours a day in some places. American doctor Travis Malene in the region.
I'm seeing, food desperation. I'm seeing healthcare workers that are eating literally just a single small meal of rice per day.
And the UN World Food Program is warning the entire population of more than 2 million people in Gaza faces crisis levels of acute food insecurity. More drama for airline passengers in the U.S. One person hospitalized after an American Airlines flight aborted takeoff in Denver this weekend. Data from Flight Radar 24 shows the plane reached a top speed of 146 miles an hour before slowing down. The airline citing a tire maintenance issue. Mark Circus on the plane.
Unfortunate situation. Plane got damaged. People got scared. A lot of people had kids with them, and there was some panic and, some unpleasant feelings in a lot of people.
And the FAA is investigating the flight from Denver to Miami. And this new incident happening after that Southwest plane from Burbank to Vegas suddenly dropped altitude earlier in the week, saying it was avoiding another plane. 2 flight attendants were injured in that incident. Mass stabbing at a Michigan Walmart. 11 people taken to the hospital. Grand Traverse County Sheriff Michael Shea calls it a random act by a Michigan resident acting alone.
Based on the information that we have at this time, it appears there were random acts, that there was no, the victims were not predetermined. Again, that's based on the information we have at this time.
Meantime, Governor Gretchen Whitmer says she is closely monitoring the situation. Suspect is said to be in custody. Job cuts in Asia. Tata Consultancy, Asia's largest IT services firm, cutting about 2% of its global workforce. That means as many as 12,000 roles could be cut during the year to March 31st. This is on account of skill gaps and rapid tech changes, according to Money Control, citing Tata Consultancy Services CEO. That rail merger could be on track. Sources say Union Pacific could reach an agreement to acquire Norfolk Southern as early as this coming week. That deal would be the largest ever in the rail industry, according to sources, and likely to include both cash and stock, and could transform the North American rail market, joining Union Pacific's network across the western U.S. with Norfolk's East Coast routes. KKR and talk to Buy ST Teledia. We get more on that from Bloomberg's at Kalegi.
KKR is in talks to buy ST Teledia Telemedia in a deal that could value the Asian digital infrastructure provider at more than $5 billion. The U.S. investment firm and ST Telemedia could reach a deal in the coming weeks. KKR is already a backer in the closely held data center company known as STT GDC with a 14.1% stake. At a more than $5 billion valuation, the deal could be among the largest for KKR this year. This according to data compiled by Bloomberg. Ed Kalegi, Bloomberg Radio.
Thank you, Ed. Tech stocks and the Fed also in focus on Wall Street. S&P 500 and NASDAQ sitting at new record highs. Bloomberg's Mag 7 index made up of Alphabet, Tesla, NVIDIA, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Meta Platforms now at a record high as well. More from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellett.
Bloomberg's gauge for the Magnificent Seven companies rose by about 0.5%, closing at its first record since December. Stocks have been lifted by stronger than expected corporate earnings, with companies heading for their highest share of beats since the second quarter of 2021. This coming week brings a significant test, with 4 of the so-called Mag 7 companies expected to report their quarterly results. Those companies are Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta Platforms. In New York, Charlie Pellett, Bloomberg Radio.
And also on top of those tech earnings, we do have the Fed's FOMC meeting this coming week. 2-day meeting wraps up on Wednesday. The Fed widely expected to keep interest rates unchanged, but Fed Chair Jay Powell is under some pressure from President Trump to cut interest rates. We'll have live special coverage for you on Bloomberg Radio and Television, and in-depth analysis on Bloomberg News Now. And that's news when you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Denise Pellegrini, and this is Bloomberg.